Hello everybody, how you doing today? I hope you're having a good day and getting ready for tomorrow, the Lord's Day. And it's time to gather with the saints, and we should be doing that. Okay, the title of the lesson today is Do Great Things for God. And sometimes in our own minds, we kind of get the wrong ideas about what greatness is. And so, what we need to realize, as long as we're doing something for God, it's a great in His sight. So sometimes it's the small things that produce greatness. And we're going to notice how God considers some things great. You know, appreciation and affection for God and Christ produce a natural desire to do something great for them. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Jesus laid down His life for us. God sent His Son. So, because of what they did for us by providing grace, well, naturally, we should want to do something for them. And so, this desire is deepened by the seeming insignificance of what we are now doing for God. I mean, sometimes if we'll sit down and start thinking what we're doing every day, well, there's really nothing significant there that stands out, probably in our mind, about doing things for God. So the desire to do something great for God, you know, it's a good desire, but for most people, it's outside of their reality. For most people, they don't think they can do anything great enough. I mean, we've known people who have been great gospel preachers, and we've known people who were great examples and influences in their communities, and we know about them and say, man, I can never reach that standard. And so to realize what God did for us, I mean, we're indebted to the Lord. I mean, it's good to realize that because it produces the proper attitudes and feelings for the Lord. I mean, let's face it. And knowing our blessings and undeserved. I mean, blessings are undeserved. We know that. We didn't really deserve it, but He did it anyway. And so what that does is kind of protects us against arrogance and pride and stubbornness. Because let's face it, what He did for us was so great. And so the desire to do something great can result in a life of true service. And that's where we're heading. That's where we want to take this. It wants to give us a life of true service. But we have to also be careful sometimes. The desire to do something great can also be dangerous because we come up with our own minds what might be a great thing to do for God, and that may not be where we're supposed to be. And so we have to be careful because, you know, we can also feel that anything we do is insignificant, unimportant, and worthless as far as God is concerned. And we can feel that way. And we can feel incapable of doing anything genuinely meaningful. I mean, possibly members feel this way all the time because here's a person up there, a man standing up there preaching the gospel and doing it effectively, and here I am just sitting in the pew listening. Well, what can I do? I mean, anything I do is nothing close to that. And so we can become defeatist who possess terrible spiritual self-images. And so Christians, they have that problem sometimes. Well, I don't preach, I don't lead singing, I don't participate, and stuff like that. And your self-esteem is probably kind of low. But let's look and see, what is a great thing? You know, most people are convinced they have never done anything great for God. I mean, even sometimes preachers feel that way. They've never really done anything great for God. I mean, so what makes an act or deed a great thing? Well, sometimes we need to figure out how are great things distinguished from insignificant things. I mean, you might say, well, there's a great big chasm between the two, but sometimes there's really hardly any difference at all. So, and you might ask, well, is it a matter of results? Sometimes when we don't get the results that we want, we might think, well, that's not doing any good. But you know what? As we said many times, when it comes to our evangelism, God doesn't look at the results. He looks at our effort. I mean, our effort to teach others. That's what God looks at. And we might ask, well, maybe if the deed that we do, what is the magnitude of the deed? Is this something really great? Or maybe does this deed have an impact upon so many people, have an impact on society that causes people to start seeking God? Um, so we might ask, is it measured in continuing influence? Or is it determined by the number of people affected? I mean, is it a matter of the changes which result from the deed? I mean, there's so many questions we come up with trying to figure out what is a great thing. And a lot of times we'll look at ourselves and say, I've never really done any of those things, at least to that degree. And so we might think that we are insignificant and really don't make that much of a difference. Now, in the New Testament, when we read in the New Testament, who did great things for Christ? Well, let's face it. We can put Paul on that list, Peter, James, John, Barnabas, Timothy, Titus. I mean, we can put all of those on our list. Yeah. And while the apostles might be on our list of greatness, virtually nothing is known about the lives and deeds of most of them. You know, we have details of Paul's life, and we have some detail about Peter's life. But what do we know about James or John? Yeah, we know some about John. Barnabas, we just know he was there as encouragement and went with Paul on one of his missionary journeys. And he went out on several missionary journeys without Paul. And Timothy, young Timothy, what do we know about him other than his grandmother and his mother? We know their names. And yeah, he was a faithful child. And Titus, less is known about him. And so, but really, for most of the apostles that went out preaching and teaching and who were there on the day of Pentecost, we absolutely have no knowledge of what they are. We just have to basically go on tradition as far as where they preached and what they taught, because it's not recorded for us. You know, we read about in Acts 17 about Apollos, an eloquent preacher, mighty in the scriptures, but not one of his sermons is recorded. Even after he was corrected by Priscilla and Aquila, there's really all he says. Paul just makes mention of him a few times as being faithful and a servant of Christ. And we know Luke wrote Luke and Acts and was a traveling companion of Paul. But little is known about what he did and where he served. We have been told he was a physician, but I mean, let's face it, if he was a physician, he would be involved in doing those things, but he spent a lot of his time on the missionary journeys of Paul, being one of Paul's companions. And so very little is known about him. We don't know who his parents were, or if he was married and had children. We don't know those things. And so that's the way it is with a lot of people here in the scriptures. We're only given just a little bit of information, and that's all we know about them. But yet many names associated with greatness are of Christians about whom very little is known. I mean, let's look at some other examples of greatness. You know, Jesus called some people great. I mean, there was a Roman centurion in Matthew 8, 5 through 13. It says, "Can you heal my servant?" All you have to do is say the words and he can be healed. And this is where Jesus responded to the crowd, "I've not seen this much faith anywhere in the house of Israel." And so Jesus marveled and said, what a great faith this Roman centurion had. And then he came across a Canaanite woman, Matthew 15. And she had great faith because she said, even the dogs eat from the master's table. And so he healed her daughter. And Matthew 15, 21 through 28, well, that was the Canaanite woman, a poor widow. I mean, here, Mark 12, 41 through 44, Jesus talked about this poor widow who gave two mites. And so all these people, they just did small things which were great in God's eyes. And that's where we need to take this conversation, folks. See, by most people's standards, these people did nothing significant. The woman who gave 2 copper coins, or two mites, 2 pennies into the treasury, didn't do anything near what the rich people were throwing in their money bags and all. And so, for most people's standards, these people didn't do anything significant, earth shaking, or of lasting importance. But by God's standards, their deeds were of such significance that their names and deeds will never die because they were recorded in God's Word. So, and we consider the memorable characters of Jesus' parables. Now, whether they were actually true individuals or just made up stories, well, that really doesn't matter. The point of the story is what matters, and that's what we need to learn from. See, he talks about kings or people of noble birth, wealth, and power. He talks about a shepherd who searched for one lost sheep, Luke 15, 4 through 7. He talks about the prodigal son who returned home. Luke 15, 11 to 32. He talked about a Samaritan who helped an injured Jew. Luke 10, 25 through 37. And he even mentions a widow who pled with an unrighteous judge. These all did something great as far as God was concerned. And that woman who pled with the unrighteous judge, Luke 18, 1 through 5. Now, let's kind of look at it and see God's definition of greatness. This is it. And so when we come down to it, living a consistent godly life is a great thing as far as God is concerned. Now, in order to live a godly life, there's several things we have to do. First of all, controlling the mind, the tongue, and the body, and using each for righteousness. 2 Corinthians 10:5, James 3:2. Being a person of compassion, as Peter mentioned, 1 Peter 3 and verse 8. Trusting God with one's life and our future, Matthew 6, 25 through 34, where we need to seek God first and God will take care of us. Sometimes refusing grudges, bitterness, and hostility a place in the heart. Get rid of those things. We're supposed to, 1 Peter 2 and verse 1. And to possess a love which hurt cannot overshadow. In other words, we're supposed to love with all of our heart, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. So to use forgiveness to build a future with those who have been offensive to us. Yeah, sometimes be nice to those who despitefully use you, as Jesus said. Pray for them. And people abuse you, forgive them, and hopefully you can build and make a good friendship out of it. That's one of the best ways to get rid of an enemy, is to make them a friend. All right, so, and we have these passages, Ephesians 4, 31 and 32. Sometimes it's applying mercy, kindness, and unselfish service and steadfastness with all their kindred feelings, attitudes, and acts. Everything they do. So great servants of God are built through years of doing small things of true greatness. So that's how it comes about. Sometimes we get in our minds that, well, it probably ought to be another way. See, in Naaman, 2 Kings 5, after he was told, just go dip in the Jordan 7 times, he was all upset and furious. He said, behold, I thought. And so that's our problem a lot of times. Behold, I thought it should be this way. See, when Naaman was told, behold, I thought, his servant came up to him later and said, if the prophet had come out and told you to do some great thing, you would have done it, right? Well, yeah. So why not? He just said do it. So the great thing you can do is just be obedient. That's where this leads us. Doing great things from God is being obedient to God. And so that is a great thing. So if all we can do is be a devout, committed Christian, living faithful, following God's instructions and rules, and we live for the Lord daily, and we should fulfill each day's opportunities without considering how big or little the deeds are. Just do something. Do something of significance. I mean, whether you consider it significant or not, you do anything for God. You mentioned you happen to walk by somebody on the trail and how you doing today? Beautiful day. Well, yeah, thank the Lord for that. I mean, that's a little thing that you can do just to get someone to start thinking about God. So, years of such living will result in true greatness by God's definition, by God's standards. So it doesn't have to be where we, well, let's face it, we're so great and like some preachers maybe have baptized thousands upon thousands by converting them to the Lord. I mean, so maybe we won't be able to do that, but we can still do something. Setting a good example, letting your light shine, causing others to glorify God. I mean, let's face it, that's a great thing for God as far as God is concerned. So learn to do those things. I mean, doing great things for God, just the little things. Work on the little things. Learn what kind of Christian that you are and what you need to be. Develop, grow in grace and knowledge, and you'll be just fine. So think about these things, and Lord willing, we'll be back again with another message. Bye bye for now.